Coming up, the rookie contract extension money flies, but not in the direction of one Cam Thomas. We'll take a look at some of those contracts around the league and what it means for Cam Thomas thinking ahead to next offseason. We dive in coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create a new account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. But Doug, Cam Thomas can't make that purchase necessarily because he did not get the contract extension ahead of the season. It's not altogether surprising from our perspective, or I think from most Nets fans' perspectives, but we did see some other teams make big decisions like this ahead of the upcoming year. Are you surprised, ultimately, that Thomas does not get the new deal?
Yeah, not all that surprising, though. We're doing a whole podcast about this, so there's a couple different ways to slice this. So on the one level, it's not surprising that Cam Thomas did not get the extension, considering where the team is right now, the sort of uncertain future, and the part where it's never been totally clear that they're like so in love with the guy, right? So I think from that standpoint, we don't have to feel all that concerned, like all that surprised that the flurry of extensions went through on Monday, because they had to be signed. All these extensions had to be signed before the season starts. So like you kind of see everyone wait to the last second, and then deadlines, sort of spur action. And so they end up all the kind of remaining guys who are locked into roles on their teams kind of signed extensions, right? I'll go through the list here. Shortly. But at the same time, like the Nets just aren't in a place where they want to do it, probably, although not many guys who are 8th overall in scoring odds are going into a season without a contract. So it's just always just as a funny, this has been the Cam Thomas story from the beginning, is that just nobody knows. And I think that this continues on the path of nobody knows, right? I think that's where and it's not surprising.
No, and this is the part where, because in theory, it's almost like we talked about with Nicholas Claxton when they made him $100 million player. It was, well, is he totally worth that money, or how will he fit in, and all these future questions you might ask. Who cares? You're going to move veteran contracts. Next year, you're going to need to have money on the books. And Nick Claxton, we like him as a player. We want him to be a part of it. But it's not going to hurt your bottom line, and you probably can always make a different decision. It's surprising in that way that the Nets didn't maybe say, well, what's the difference if we pay Cam Thomas? Okay, so he's on the books next year. We got $40 million coming off from Ben Simmons. Even if it turned out that Cam Thomas doesn't graduate to that next level of stratosphere of player, is it going to really hurt us, as we'll get into some specific comp numbers here, if we pay him X dollars AAV for the next 3 or 4 seasons? Probably not. So there is that part of it where it gives you pause from an organizational standpoint, and all the things that have gone on over the start of his career, you say, maybe they just don't like him that much. The flip side would be, which I think is the more likely, is that Cam Thomas says, listen, these first few seasons been a little rough. I didn't get on the court as early as I wanted to. Then I kind of break out last year. Top 8 scorer, like Doug said. I go, maybe I wait. Maybe I play this whole season out, and then we talk about where the dollars are, because there's already big money being given out, and there's potentially going to be more money for me next offseason. So I think there could be some Cam Thomas willing to bet on himself in this instance as well, even though there's some real dollars out there that got spread around.
Yeah, look, I'm sure that there's discussions were had, and I'm sure that everyone, each party slid their number across the table, and they just disagreed.
Because parties scoffed at each other.
Okay, so let me roll through some of these extensions so everyone can get a sense of sort of like where we are, and I would call it the buckets of types of players that signed extensions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can see where you think Cam Thomas fits into this mix. And I will say 2 things. 1, draft slot matters with this. 2, sort of franchise cornerstone piece matters with this. And 3, how good the team is matters with this too. I think there's other pieces of information here that are relevant. So let me just roll through here where we are. So Cade Cunningham signs 5 years, $224 million, first overall pick, right? Like, not surprising. You lock up your long-term first overall picks for a long time. I don't think that's controversial. By the way, I'm not here to discuss sort of like if these are going to be great contracts later. I'm just saying like
this is the money,
the rhetoric around it, right? Like I think we can all understand. So Cade does his. Jalen Green gets in at the last second, 3 years, 106. Interesting comp, but also number 2 overall pick in the draft on a good team. Okay, so like maybe you want to say Jalen Green, Cam Thomas, like aren't so dissimilar from each other. There's contextual differences for sure. Evan Mobley 5 for 224. I think we all understand that one. Scottie Barnes 5 for 224. I think we get that one based on like sort of like his place as, you know, the cornerstone of what the Raptors are. Suggs gets in at 5 for 150. Very good team, playoff level player, right? Like not all that surprising for that number. Franz Wagner 5 for 224, eighth overall pick. Playoff guy. I think everyone kind of agrees. So we're not going to nickel a dime. But then you get to, and then Sengun at 5 at 185. So like those are like the
maybe. And then Trey Murphy, just real quick. Trey Murphy too, 4 for 112 with the Pelicans.
Yeah. There's other guys. There's Jalen Johnson 3 for 150. There are some other guys. Like so those are. I don't think, but those guys are like all on good teams. All have just proven track records at some point of just being like super high level players, either as a role player, high end role player like Trey Murphy, or or Jalen Johnson or more. Or just like maybe we're going to border on superstar in like 2 years, right? So I don't like that's the kind of extension. Then you get a couple other little extensions, like you get Corey Kispert 4 for 54, right? You get Jaden Hardy 3 for 18. So there are smaller extensions. And my guess is like something like those were probably offered to Cam Thomas, not 3 for 18, but like something like that was offered. And Cam Thomas was like, no, I'd rather hit the open market or like we'll just or revisit off the offseason. So it's not like you just only can sign these extension at these huge numbers. You can sign smaller ones, but you might be like, and I'm at the risk of going very long-winded here. Like if you're Cam Thomas, you just might not be interested in doing that because you're saying, hey, I might lead the league in scoring next year, and then we'll see who wants to pay up, right? So there's a push and pull.
And I think ultimately there, when you highlight these massive numbers, 150, $200 million extensions over multiple seasons and the players and teams that they're on, and then these shorter term extensions, there's this incredible gulch in between there where a lot of guys could make money and get paid. And I think you might be correct just in the sense of, I don't know where the dollars are going to be a year from now, but I know if I'm Cam Thomas, I'm closer to the 150, $200 million extension than I am to the 3 for 18. And if we can't, Nets and my representation feel like we're closer on that side of things, then let's just go ahead and talk about it next off season. And oh, by the way, coming up here in a second, there's a reason why waiting to talk about it until next offseason could be incredibly beneficial for Cam Thomas. We'll get into that here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over on FanDuel. You can start the season big, the NBA season, keep the season going over on NFL with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Look, if you want some middle of the game stuff, they got the live betting. That's just, you really can't beat it. You can check out the latest scores, view the play-by-play right there where you can make your bets. You got a hunch in the game. You want to throw it in there because you're watching. And like, look, there's nothing better than this when it comes to NFL games, when it comes to NBA games. So what a great time of year too. I mean, just no better time to be over at FanDuel. Maybe you want to get in on a little old friend there, Cam Thomas action. Like I said, 8th overall in scoring leader odds on FanDuel. Just do yourself a favor. Go and look at the players above him. Let me tell you right now, you're going to have heard of some of those guys. Okay. You're going to have heard of some of the guys that are above him in the scoring odds. It's all there for you on FanDuel. You can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 real money bet. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with just a $5 real money bet on FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, of course, talking about the season about to kick off underway. As you may have known, we were going to go predictions today. Guess what? We'll do predictions tomorrow for the Nets. Minutes, over-unders on some different things like win totals, obviously, and then maybe bold predictions for what happens around trade. So be sure to be a part of that on our Wednesday episode as well. But for now, it's the key conversation around extensions or lack thereof for not only Cam Thomas, but by the way, Day'Ron Sharpe did not get extended either, guys. I don't want to break the hearts of the fan base, but he'll still be looking for his contract going into this year as well. The part here where it makes sense for both sides to maybe not be too concerned about this, and we heard it from Sean Marks as well, liking Cam Thomas, wanting to sit down, wanting to talk numbers and see if it works itself out. But Sean Marks had said this offseason, there was no real pressure for the Nets to feel like they needed to get a deal done going into this year. I'll go back to the Nicholas Claxton. There wasn't any pressure to get him taken care of before he got to the offseason. And then when he got there and the market came to fruition, That's it. Okay. You're $100 million guy. Let's get this done. It doesn't feel like it's going to be hard for the Nets to do the same thing next off season if they choose to with Cam Thomas. The only caveat might be, assuming the season goes badly, assuming you have a top draft pick, there'll be some calculation around how do we make sure that if it's Cooper Flagg, that if it's Ace Bailey, right, that we're ready to, in the next offseason, have all the money available to bring in player X, Y, and Z and hit the ground running on a successful rebuild and turn the page on making the playoffs and those kind of things. So I do wonder if they'll have that in their mind. And that doesn't say anything against the fact that Cam Thomas should be considered a part of those plans and capable of being one of those key contributors as you bring in these new young pieces.
Yeah, I don't think like anyone ever thought he was getting some, I mean, at least we didn't, some $30 million a year contract extension. I just never saw that to be in the cards. And, you know, we had Yossi Goslin on, he kind of predicted somewhere like in the 20s, right? If they were to get it done, something like that, which, and again, we never know what goes on behind closed doors. Cause again, like, remember, it wasn't like these guys just didn't talk all summer, and then they just went into the season unsure. There's been discussions here for sure. And, you know, when Sean Marks says that there's not a lot of pressure, it's always so funny because they're like, yeah, it's maybe for you, but I don't know if you're Cam Thomas, you might want to get paid. Like you might want to go, you know, might want to go from 4 million, pressure. Yeah, $4 million a year this year to like, if we can just lock up 20 million, life-changing money. Now that might be okay, right? So there's always a funny dance that goes on with these things. So I don't think anyone thought that, you know, like these huge like Cade or Barnes numbers were or even like Suggs and stuff like that. Like I don't think that anyone kind of predicted that we would land there. You make an interesting point though about trying to predict for the future, because if you're going to be presumably bringing in like really high level draft assets over the next couple of years, right? Like something like top 3, top 4 pick this year at worst, hopefully the year after. And these, I mean, knock on wood, those guys should be like kind of max forever guys, right? So like just to start there, maybe not right out of the gate, but you know, you maybe, and if you don't see Cam Thomas as for sure part of it, then I can see waiting. I just also think it's so funny. I mean, could this have gone any other way where Cam Thomas was concerned? It's just we're a year, you know, 2021 draft. We're year 4 of this. It's never been clear. No one has any idea if they like him or not. Right. And like this just does nothing to crystallize that. And you know, my wife and I talk about this a lot. It's like, hey, you can say all you want. It's your actions that speak, right? Like you can say anything you want. Doesn't matter. Let's just go back and look at the actions of the team or the person or whatever. What do the actions tell you? The actions would tell me that it's not a guy that they see as part of their long-term future. And that's been since day one. And so, yeah, say whatever you want, but what actions would show you that this guy, that you love this guy? I can't really think of many.
Well, and you know, it's funny too, because you would say, it's like, what's the only action you've ever seen that suggests that the franchise loves this guy? Well, it was drafting him. But remember, at the time, it was catching kind of what seemed like a falling value. And as we always talk about when it comes to the draft, at some point, you're just talking about, give me the most valuable player on the board, and I'll figure out what that means at another time, right? So, hey, he's a high-powered scorer. Great. Let's see what that turns into. So, you know, the truth serum test for Sean Marks in the front office of, at the time that you drafted Cam Thomas, and remember, very different era of Nets basketball in that moment as well. But when you drafted him, were you thinking player that we develop into core member who is our lead scorer and plays off a great backcourt tandem with player TBD? Or were you thinking, hey, this guy can get buckets, we can turn him into something to improve our franchise at some point? And it probably also feels different to have been in the moment, be talking about Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and championship runs and drafting Cam Thomas versus now, when you have none of those superstars anymore, and now Cam Thomas is your best scorer, and he is the best player on your basketball team entering the season, right? So I think there is that different path now that the Nets find themselves on through their own doing, right? The Sean Marks and the Nets were not passengers on this journey. They were active in the ride, but now you find yourself looking at this player in a different light. It does now, though, set up for a very interesting season. Like, what will we be talking about? You mentioned Jalen Green there and his extension. 35 million AAV. Now it's 3 years, so it's a shorter term, a little bit shorter. But what are we going to talk about if Cam Thomas is top 5 in scoring this year? Like, what will he accomplish this season that will then have the Nets looking back and going, oh, could we have saved ourselves 5 to 7 million a year if we figured out the numbers leading into it? I don't get the sense that Cam Thomas was willing to do, team friendly deal here, but I will be curious about how it changes going into next offseason. And there's a lot of guys that didn't sign extensions this year that he'll be in the waters with, right?
I don't think it's going to change anything. I think we're going to be in the same spot because I think
it won't change it. It won't change it for the Nets organization. It might change it like for how Cam Thomas thinks about it, right? Like, I mean, that would be he feels even more bullish about what he's worth after this season. The Nets still look at it and go, yeah, we still don't know if you're the player we should pay 30, 35, whatever $million to a year.
Well, right, but that's probably where they are now. So
right,
that's what I mean.
Yeah. So this is, I guess, sorry. This to me is pushing towards Cam Thomas says, I'll see you in free agency. Like he's pushing towards the market will tell me whether or not I'm worth more than what you guys are telling me right now.
And it would still, and by the way, they'll get an out here too, because it'll be restricted free agency.
Yep.
And they'll be able to just let the market dictate that too. And they can keep pushing, they keep kicking the can down the road. And because again, we've long known this, you think you don't understand how the Nets view Cam Thomas, go figure out how the rest of the league views it. You don't know that either. Like there's people, the opinions there are all over the place about what his actual value is. And I guess what I meant by, we're not going to learn anything is that I just don't see the situation because of how the season is likely to play out. I don't see the situation being that all that different than it is now. He's going to score. He's going to score a ton. We already know that the team's going to stink. So if you don't like him, they're just going to say, well, if you don't like Cam Thomas, it's going to be empty stats, bad team. Okay. That's if you don't like him. If you do like him, it's going to be, well,
bad team around him, can't help
bad
him.
team around him. Nets never did anything, never developed him correctly. The system stinks, like whatever. So all the same stories are going to be true. Yeah. There's the only difference will be that will just be a year later. I just don't see the one way I can see a change is if like he does go crazy game expansion here, where it's like he gets up to 5.5 assists. I'm not even going crazy with this. 5.5 assists a game, and the defense markedly improves, and he just frankly, they just win a lot more games than anyone projected. Like those are the things that could change it, but I just don't even think those are all that likely. We didn't see anything in the preseason that's going to change. And so,
by the way,
and so I just think we're going to be a year from now having a very, very similar discussion.
Yeah, I agree with you. It'd have to be a stat line that says, oh, okay. And our over under total was set at X. And now we just shot past that because specifically of Cam Thomas and his play. And that's something that organizationally they're trying to guard against having happen. This team winning too many games to not set themselves up. Right. So, coming up here in a second, I do just want to ask then this question that was posed to us by a fan over on YouTube in the last couple of days that I do wonder if it could play into the Nets in-season decision-making. We'll get into that to close things out in just one moment.
I want to let you know this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Halloween right around the corner. Sometimes you want to have fun with what scares you. Sometimes it's a little too scary to actually think about that stuff. I'm not talking about the fears that involve like zombies and ghosts and witches and all that other stuff. I'm talking about the things that maybe sometimes you just spend a little too much time thinking about, the things that are, keeping you up at night or you're waking up in the morning thinking about. Those are the fears you really got to get a really good handle on early and often. Therapy can great tool for facing those fears and finding ways to overcome them. That's the thing. You want to identify them and then explore different solutions. This is where BetterHelp and therapy can step in and really, really help. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient. It's flexible. It's 100% suited to your schedule. It's basically all about you. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, you have to give BetterHelp a try. You just fill out a brief questionnaire. You're going to get matched with a licensed therapist. Just switch anytime. It's no additional charge. You're going to make sure it works out for you. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. It's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
All right, as we tie a bow on today's Locked On Nets episode, of course, reminding you tomorrow we'll be doing predictions. We'll also give a little look at the season opener for the Brooklyn Nets as they get their 2024-2025 campaign underway. And the over-under, the elusive 18.5 win total. We'll be talking about that and a lot more, so be sure you're part of it tomorrow as well. When it comes to Cam Thomas, so I was going to save this for our fan take Friday, but we're going to have games on Friday. The Nets will play on Friday and on Sunday, starting off their opening week here this season. Afro Lord, frequent flyer on YouTube. He said he goes left field prediction. Cam Thomas gets traded this season, and it tickled my brain on the idea that, so what if Cam Thomas is doing all the scoring and showing a little bit of that improvement, but it's not going to be the version of it where the Brooklyn Nets are ready to go down the road of paying him? Is there any world where you think a team sees it and goes, hey, I see value here. I see $30 million AAV here. We'll go ahead and take him now. We'll get the extension. We'll have him as a restricted free agent next offseason. And maybe the Brooklyn Nets just grab one more asset. And when they're sitting here saying we're on the path to 17 wins this year, Cam Thomas is not going to be a part of the future long term.
I mean, it's possible. I could see it maybe happening, right?
That's what gave me pause, just because he asked it and I said, Afro Lord gave the prediction. I thought, I guess I can't say it's impossible. Like, it's not off the table. So that means it has to at least be a possibility this year.
It would have to be a team that, really saw a bright future with him. It would have to be a team that for sure wanted to re-sign him, right? Like, think like Emmanuel Quickly with the Raptors. It's like, okay, Raptors trade, they get Quick, they get IQ, and they re-sign him to like a long-term deal, right? It'd be something like that. Like, it would be that kind of situation. If you want to say like, okay, score first. I think Quickly's got, a slightly more expansive game here, but I guess we're talking about, because like this happened last year, right? Quickly gets traded from the Knicks. He's in a contract season, and I'm pretty sure at the time, and the Raptors re-sign him. So I think that like that, if I got the order of operations on that one wrong, let me know. But these are the kind of situations. It's so hard for me to see. He's just so polarizing. He's so polarizing. Like, because if you're going to give up assets, you have to re-sign him. And at that point, I just don't know why you wouldn't wait to restricted free agency. And do you think there's a team out there that sees him as like I don't know. I don't want to neg him here. I think that like it's possible.
So what I would say, because the only thing I was going to add in too is it also, you mentioned their assets, right? So from a Brooklyn Nets perspective, in order to decide to make that, it's not just about that, well, he'll be a restricted free agent and we may have to make the choice of paying him or not. It's also give us value. Like, we still need some value out of this player. So there may be a team out there that says, yeah, we like him. We would like to re-sign him, but for a first round pick, whatever it ends up being for a player and a first round pick, well, that's more than we need to do. We can wait until next offseason. Once you get into the waters of Brooklyn Nets are taking calls on Cam Thomas, that also tells the rest of the league, so if we wait until next offseason and we really want him, Brooklyn's not going to be in those waters. You may have teams you're competing against, but it's not going to come from the Nets side of it. So there is that part of it. You also just mentioned something I think is worth closing out on here. I like Cam Thomas. Like, we like Cam Thomas as a player. I think that we've already seen the preseason. I said after game 1, and it looks like it is a trend, not a blip, with the way that he's been playing on the defensive end of the floor. So I'm very excited to see how he performs over the course of this season. Whether or not the 22-point scorer who maybe, as Doug said, gets up to 4 assists, 5 assists per game is something the Nets look at and say it's worth X and worth keeping around beyond this season, that's still going to be a TBD. But this isn't a knock on Cam Thomas. I think it's mostly just the reality of where the Nets organization is and the choices they're going to have to make in the upcoming seasons. You can't be 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line, even on a whatever extension, talking about the 2 rookies you got in the next 2 draft classes who need their max extensions. And now we got to move this player off. We got to clear X amount of cap so we can pay the guys we really want to pay. And in that regard, I think that's the clear delineation. There are players that you like and you're willing to pay. And then there's the players that are your transcendent franchise core guys that you must pay. And the goal here for the Nets is to have 2 of those guys over the next 2 draft classes. And that's the difference about paying or not paying Cam Thomas or any of these players anything of significance in the short term.
Yeah. Again, I'm just like not exactly sure. It's such a cop out, right? It's just, I just never know what we're going to learn. I feel like we're going to talk about this all season. Is that,
we'll have a midway checkpoint where we say, like, look what Cam Thomas has done through 20 games. The Nets have signed him to the extension this offseason, right? Like, that's going to be a conversation we have for sure.
I don't think it's going to be. I think we just know what he's going to do. I guess maybe we're seeing this. Maybe we're just talking about 2 different things. Maybe. I just think we know sort of what he's going to do, short of just some crazy leap that we haven't seen it yet in terms of like offensive expansion. He can score. No, I'm not There's no, I'm not making
No debate
any,
there.
there's no bones to pick about the scoring. So there's no there. It's about like complete offensive players, right? And the other part with, even trading him too, is that remember these teams, the IQ the comp doesn't even really work either, because Toronto was like, hey, we're going to go into a rebuild and we're going to ship off a guy that we can't re-sign in OG Anunoby. And so now,
Right.
like, we're going to bring in some younger players, maybe, Barrett a little post hype, and then quickly, and we'll re-sign them, and they'll be kind of on the same age curve as our current guys. But the thing is, like, the Nets wouldn't take back a contract like that. So, because like that works because OG's aging out, they don't want to pay him, and he's just like not on their current timeline. That's fine.
Right.
But the Nets aren't going to trade for a kind of guy like that. Like, they're not making a move to win. And so it wouldn't even work on a functional level to kind of even make that comp about why that kind of player was traded, because you would think, okay, hey, we'll take Cam Thomas back in because we're going to ship out a guy we don't want to re-sign. Well, the Nets aren't going to take that guy because they're just going to lose it, because they're not going to re-sign the person either, and they're just going to lose them. So why would you do that, right? And so
right.
I'm using
Some
this one
functional
specific
restrictions here for the Nets. Yeah.
I'm using this one specific, or another good example, actually, maybe a better example would be a guy like Giddey. Giddey does not sign an extension, right? Giddey gets traded from OKC. They bring in a veteran. Chicago's like, we can't re-sign this guy in Caruso. We don't want to. He doesn't fit what we're doing. So we'll take Giddey. That's actually another good example, because the Nets wouldn't do that deal either, to like take a Caruso type back for Cam Thomas, right? And so
we got some guys on our roster, veterans in the backcourt we were hoping to move off of during the course of the season, not take them back.
Exactly. So as with everything, is that like when we look at these, okay, could Cam Thomas be traded? I guess. I mean, anything could happen. A suitcase with $1 million could fall out of the sky right now, and then we're all celebrating. But
nothing.
It's when you get into the weeds of like how it would actually happen, and the pieces that would be sent back, and the kind of team that would add them. When there's only 30 teams, that just kind of starts limiting the reality of that situation. So I'm going to amend my thing and say, no, he does not get traded. Just because I think it'd be just too hard to arrange the deck chairs in a way that made sense.
Yeah, I think it will be interesting. I think that it will at some point come up, just because if the team is really bad and he's scoring and playing really well, it's a natural topic of conversation around the deadline to go along with the veterans. But I think this is closer to the Nick Claxton than it is to, as you say, like an OG Anunoby situation. It's you're homegrown. It's not going to hurt us to pay you next off season. We'll let the market dictate, and we'll see. And really, again, optimistically, even for the Brooklyn Nets as well, my final thought is, we hope your game takes that next leap. Like, we hope we're here next off season saying, yeah, 30, 35 million a year. Great. Because you averaged over 5 assists a game, even in a bad season, because your defense looked like it took that next step forward, and you dig your heels in on that end of the floor, because it means we believe you can be a part of the core going forward, just like they did with Nick Claxton. Is he here forever? Maybe, maybe not. But the money didn't hurt, and he's a good player, and you know the skill set, and you know that he brings value. So I think that's where it ultimately ends up. But as with everything, when it comes to the Brooklyn Nets, you turn around, you blink, you click your heels twice, and suddenly it's a completely different scenario than what you saw coming.
All right, we're going to get out of here. Make sure you go to wegotnets.com. Grab 4 stories to start off your season. We got Cam Thomas. We got Noah Clowney. We got Jordy Fernandez. We got the draft lottery odds. It's all free. Just put in your email. So, you don't have to put in your name. We don't even want your name. Just want the email.
Honestly,
that's all it is.
We'd be a little bit upset.
Well, it's just frankly, the field's not going to work, because if you try to put your name in and the email address, it's just not going to work at all. So, like,
no information will get to you. If you
it'll say that's not an email address. Just put your email address in, please. All right. So, but put in your email address. Grab over at wegotnets.com. 4 days, 4 stories to get you started for the NBA season.
We'll, of course, be in predictions, game preview tomorrow for the Brooklyn Nets. You choose your friends by their character and your socks by their color. Now that is Gary Oldman.
Yeah, he's dead. He died, right?
No, he's on slow. Oh my God, slow horses. Where is this guy?
Who am I thinking? Who's the guy from Harry Potter that died? Alan Rickman. All right,
Rickman.
Well,
yeah.
R.I.P. to him and Gary Oldman, one of the all-time great poets.
Gary Oldman, though, which is nice.
He'll be missed. And Gary Oldman, one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back in tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.